What's the story, YouTube? This is Heritages. This is my X-Men Dark Phoenix review. Yeah, just like Godzilla, we got this 2 days ahead of the States. So I think as far as I know over there, it's just going to be called Dark Phoenix. But it's out here now. I'm just back for it. So I'll just give you my opinions on the film. Just like with Godzilla, I'll just give you the spoiler-free ones at the moment. I enjoyed it. I have to be honest now. I mean, I was a bit trepidatious going in because it's done by Simon Kinberg and it's directed and written by him, and he's the guy that did The Last Stand, and that wasn't good at all. And I was a bit worried about what way it was going to work out, and they haven't really got their X-Men universe set up to properly do the Dark Phoenix saga, because there's no Shi'ar Empire, there's no Macran Crystal, there's no aliens at all that we know in their universe. So it was a tough move for them to have to do this film. But I gotta be honest, and like I said, when I was watching it as well, I was sitting here thinking, I don't know, but up to halfway point, I was sitting here thinking, is this like a 6? You know, like, it's not bad. It's not making me want to leave or anything, but there's nothing really thrilling happening. You know, like, nothing great. But then it got in to the last half of the film, and I just had an absolute blast. That raised it to a 7 to me. So if you're not interested in spoilers or anything like that, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but I really enjoyed it. I have to think it's probably the most faithful to the comic of all the X-Men film, because one of the problems the X-Men film have is they're a little bit too clinical. They've always been about the metaphor of the different, the outsider, anyone who feels strange, you know, like, and they've been making parallels between like different races and homosexuality and all this sort of stuff, and that lent it a lot of weight, but it's also stripped of an awful lot of fun. And this one, you know, it's just far more about the fun. It's actually great to see in this film that they portray the X-Men as superheroes and that their relationship with mankind is the best it's ever been. So I was actually surprised to see that, and I really enjoyed it. So, I mean, I'd give it, it's getting trashed by the critics, by the way. Last I checked, it was like 14% on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. I think that's because, like I've said before, when they see CGI, they turn off their brains. And there's an awful lot of CGI in this because there's an awful lot of superhero action. That's what we're here for, just like with Godzilla. We're not here to watch the human story. So I think that's what's thrown them, and that's why they're rejecting it so much. But if you're a fan of the X-Men comics from the 80s and the 90s, if you even love the X-Men 90s cartoon, I think you'll get a blast out of this, particularly, as I said, when it gets going at the last half of the film. So certain characters die, certain characters don't. Like I said, sometimes it's for the better, actually, in fairness. I'll get into that in spoilers. But yeah, I enjoyed it, I have to be honest with you. I don't mind what the critics are saying. Like, if you're a fan of superhero films, I think you'll have a great time with this. Like I said, it's a 7. It's not the best film, but it's much better than Apocalypse. And I'd say it does feel like a different beast to Days of Future Past, but it's more the spiritual successor to Days of Future Past as you see the world that they were heading towards after they've stopped Mystique from killing Trask. So there you go. That's my non-spoiler review for it. I give it a 10 out of 10. Like I said, it was a little bit iffy getting going, but when it does get going, it's an enormous amount of fun. There's some creative combat stuff going on. Great team up between different characters, and I think if you're an action fan, you'll enjoy it. So there you go, 10 out of 10. So from now on, it's going to be spoilers. Spoilers from now on. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, don't listen from now on. Okay, the gut of the story, it basically starts in 1975 when Jean Grey's been she's out driving with her parents, and she ends up causing a crash. You know, like, and this ends up putting her into the custody of Charles Xavier, who takes her in and basically raises her into the woman that she is. And the first big action sequence we see is what's in the trailer when they go into space to rescue that space shuttle, because they think there's a solar flare about to hit it, but it's actually the Phoenix Force, and that's what they've gone up to stop. And this is the part of the film I didn't really like, because well, it's not that I didn't like it. It was entertaining. Like, that whole sequence, you know, where they rescue the astronauts is brilliant. But the biggest problem for me, and it's the problem that I've always had with these X-Men films, is Jennifer Lawrence. Mystique is not the leader of the X-Men. She has never been the leader of the X-Men. It does me head in that the only reason we're stuck with this is because she's become such a big star that they've insisted on making her a more central character to these films than she needs to be. The leader of the X-Men is Scott. If, you know, bar him, Storm. You know, like, but it's not Mystique, so it does me head in when she's in here. And I have to be honest with you, one of the best things that happens in this film is she gets killed. Like, I know that sounds awful, but the truth is, once she is out of the picture, it just comes together as an actual X-Men film. And you know, if you're a fan of like I said, of the comics, a fan of the cartoon, you are seeing Scott lead the X-Men of Beast, of Jean Grey, of Storm, and Nightcrawler. You know, you would have loved to seen Colossus in there or something like that, but they had to go with what they had. So, getting back to the story, what basically happens is when they come back from space, Jean has absorbed the Phoenix Force and she starts to manifest its power, becoming more and more powerful as she goes along. And this starts to break down mental blocks that have been put in her head by Professor Xavier. And we basically find out that what he'd done is that she was having a very hard time dealing with the fact that she killed her parents. So he basically stopped her learning about it. And it basically dampened down her power. Now, this is where some of that intersectional third wave feminism bullshit that's coming in, because they start trying to portray Professor Xavier as a villain. I'm sorry, if you've got an 8-year-old kid that's killed their parents, you don't want to shove that in their face. I mean, whatever about him having to relate what happened to her when she's an adult, fair enough. But you can't expect the child to handle that trauma. So what he did was basically give her the equivalent of psychic antipsychotics to stop her from losing the plot completely. And I just don't understand why these people who are making a big deal of it don't realise that she probably would have killed herself before she was 12 without being able to deal with the guilt. But either way, we get onto the story there where Jean finds out that her father's still alive. She goes to see him. She starts to realise what's happened to her. And this results in a fight with the X-Men and the police in the, as you see in that trailer, that bit where Quicksilver's running around base and everything. And this is where she kills Mystique. Now, she didn't mean to, but I mean, she's just losing control, and she ends up fleeing for the scene and going off to try and find Magneto, to try and find him if she can help him. But this is the point of the film where Beast loses the plot because he is in love with her, and he decides to leave the team because he thinks they have to put her down. Scott still thinks he can save her. So does Professor Xavier at this stage. But this is the point where the human-mutant relations start to break down. Because up to this point, as I said, they were portrayed as superheroes. It was brilliant. Kids admire them. They think that they're heroes. The Professor X has a direct hotline to the president. You know, like, so I mean, it's been a great time for the mutant-human relations. So Charles feels he has a duty to bring her in to try and preserve what they have. Now, it's at this point where we have a complete left-field revelation that I didn't see a call, which is the introduction of the Dabari. Now, for those who've read the Dark Phoenix saga in the comic book, the Dabari is the name of the sun and the planet that orbited it, that Jean Grey destroyed when she consumed that sun in order to get to the Shi'ar Empire. I was not expecting this at all. I thought the blonde-haired girl in the trailers was Emma Frost. I thought it was a revamped version of her, and they were going to do the mastermind situation with her instead of Jason Weingart. Nope, turns out she's actually an alien shapeshifter along the lines of the Kree. Not the Kree, the Skrulls, only they're a hell of a lot more durable. These type of aliens, if you shoot them with guns, they can recover. If you shoot them with a 50 cal, they can't. And if you've got mutants fighting them, they can pretty much take them out. So this leads into some really good action down the road later on. But getting back to the story, Jean goes to Magneto to try and help to learn to control herself. But it's like apples and oranges. He was basically consumed by vengeance. He just stopped because he wanted to. Jean is being consumed by the Phoenix Force. Her desires, her passions, her needs are overwhelming her, and they're endangering everybody around her. So she basically leaves him after having a fight with the military who've tracked her down. And this results in Magneto worrying about the fact that Jean, if she blows it for all mutants by being such a big threat, will lose their homeland, because they've basically been given a reservation or something where they've been left by themselves and just live and prosper. In fairness, he actually wasn't going to go after her at first until Hank comes along to say that she killed Mystique. And after all these years, Eric still has feelings for her. So you have two separate teams now coming after Jean. You've got the X-Men, with Charles, Scott, Nightcrawler, and Storm. And you've got Eric and Hank and a few of his new brotherhood, for want of a better term. They're not really a brotherhood, but they are mutants from there who are concerned about losing what they've got. And this results in a big showdown at a hotel where Jean is being basically manipulated by the Dabari leader that is played by Jessica Chastain. She's attempting to try and get the Phoenix Force out of her, because they do actually say, in line with what happened in the original comic, that the Phoenix Force destroyed their planet. And their aim is to try and harness it, to try and rebuild their planet on Earth, or destroy it as basically vengeance for what it's done to their own homeworld. So this leads to a showdown in the streets of New York between the X-Men and Magneto as they vie to get to Jean first. This is the part in the trailers where Magneto brings the subway car out of the ground, and it's actually a pretty cool fight. It's great to see Nightcrawler and Scott being used so creatively for once. And like I said, now that Mystique's out of the picture, Scott Summers really steps up here in terms of actual screen time. It's actually great to see him do something for once. And he indeed seems to be the one that, once he gets into that building, manages to help talk her down. Mind you, this is after Kurt get sorry, this is after Charles gets into the building to try and break it down, try and separate her from the Jessica Chastain's character, who's never actually named, to be honest with you. But I mean, it's what happens here is Jean is completely lost at this stage, and she starts doing this really cruel thing where she basically forces Xavier to walk up the stairs even though he's crippled, like using her telekinesis. And she, at this stage now, fully remembers all the stuff that was done to her, blames Charles for it, but in a nice parallel with the psychic fight that they have in the comic, he just gets her to look into his mind and just gets her to see that he did everything to help her and that she still has hope as long as she holds on. There's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't need to be fixed. Like that. He can actually help her if she's got hope. And this brings her back, and just as she regains control, this is when the police turn up and capture everybody. Now, this ends up in the scene we've seen in the trailers where they're on the train. And this is the point in the film where I was all the way through this, I was thinking, it's a 6. It's okay. It's not bad, but it's nothing brilliant. This is the part where it just elevates it up for me, like I was saying earlier. This is what made it a 7. That whole sequence on the train was fantastic. You've got wonderful storytelling going on. You've got great combat sequences and team-ups between Storm and Hank. You got team-up between Scott. You got teams up between Magneto and Jean. It's just great. And it's great to see at this moment as well that the humans who have pretty much turned on them decide to actually trust them and release them. And this leads into this battle that ends up with the final confrontation between Jessica Chastain's character and Jean. Now, she's managed to absorb some of the Phoenix Force and she's trying to get the rest of it. But Jean, at this stage, just basically becomes full-on Phoenix and takes out all the debris that are coming at her. And it's pretty epic looking. And there's actually a lovely parallel with the Mastermind sequence I was talking about, where Jessica Chastain's character, like I said, was trying to give her the power, and Jean just gives her all of it. And it just overloads her and she can't take it. At this stage, though, that Jean realizes that she can't restrain herself and she can't control it because she nearly mortally wounds Scott. And this is the moment where she decides that she has to choose between whether she's going to stay as a woman or whether she becomes a god. So she ends up grabbing the Jessica Chastain characters, going up to space and detonating herself. And that's pretty much how it ends. What happens after this then is just a series of kind of denouements. We go back and we see that Scott has renamed the school from the Xavier School for Gifted Hunters to the Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters, which is what's happening in the comics, and it's a nice little nod ahead to that. Storm is teaching in the school. Hank is now the headmaster because Charles has retired. He's had enough of all this. I think it's been too traumatic for him, and he's now in France. And that's where he runs into Eric, and they end up having a game of chess and a tie-up, basically paralleling some of the other films that happened earlier on. And the film actually ends with a little tilt skyward, and you see what looks like a phoenix effect going across the sky, very small, and so basically intimating that Jean will be back. And that's pretty much the guts of the story. I have to admit now, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I was a bit dodgy to the beginning. I was thinking, I'm not sure if I'm liking this too much. Not hating it, but not liking it. And then it's just like that whole train sequence was fantastic. It's definitely worth going and see it for that alone. I can understand, like I said, why the critics are hating it, because there's an awful lot of superhero action in this. And as I said, if you're a comic book fan, if you're the cartoon fan from back in the 90s, I think you're going to get a great blast out of this. I think you're going to see a real big difference between the critic score and the audience score this and Rotten Tomatoes when they're allowed to actually talk about it. Like I said, it's got some of that intersectional third wave feminism poured on it. There's a eye-rolling moment where Mystique, says they should be named the X-Women. There's, like I said, the completely baffling nonsense about how Professor Xavier is somehow a bad guy for helping a mentally traumatized child and protecting her from that trauma, which I can only presume is some sort of nonsense about how, a white man has kept a woman down or something like that in these guys' heads. But besides that, it's pretty much the most faithful adaptation of the storyline, as I think you can do. Like I said, it does the Phoenix Saga bit where she gets the powers in space. It does the Dark Phoenix Saga bit where she has to sacrifice herself to save her friends and her family. And it's a hell of a lot more faithful to The Last Stand, which is the last film that Kinsberg, who directed and wrote this, actually did. And I was really worried, like I said earlier on, about that. So I think they did a much better job. But yeah, it's enjoyable. It's entertaining. The effects are great. I think the direction for his first time go at a gig is competent enough. I don't think there was a lot of shaky cam. I did seem to be able to see all the action that was going on, and we're seeing some really innovative uses of Nightcrawler, of Scott, and of Hank, like, so I mean, and it was great to see Storm actually, being a badass. So there you go. There's my X-Men Dark Phoenix review. I really enjoyed it. Don't know if I'll go see it again. Like I said, it's not going to light the world on fire or anything, but it's a good, solid action entertainer film. It's the most comic book the X-Men films have ever been. I think it's probably going to be the last one they make, because with the deal with Disney now, it's going to be folded in the MCU. And to be honest with you, it's a nice bridge. Like if you look how serious X-Men 1, 2 and 3 were, and say Days of Future Past, and contrast with what's going on in the Marvel Universe, this is a good segue into it. So there could be, I've heard rumours that Kevin Feige was involved in some of the stuff in this. You can definitely see those fingerprints in it. So there you go. That's my review there. If you like and subscribe, leave comments in the comment section to let us know what you think about it yourself, whether you think it was like complete trash or whether you actually enjoyed it despite what the critics are saying. And there you go. So take care, guys. Bye.